That brings us to the proposed 2017 tax levy first read.
So what you have in front of you tonight is your first read of a levy. And I know Tim had sent in some comments, but we needed to check the numbers he sent in.
Which were wrong.
So the first box that you see on the left is the 2016 tax year levy, which was payable this school year. The board levied last year, and then that first column is what the board levied, which was the 4.95% of the previous year's levy. The county automatically will provide with this loss definition, which is actually they give you an extra 3% of what you're levying, on top of what you're levying for any property taxes that are uncollected by the county.
It's 3% on the operating funds
then
and 5
5
on the debt,
service.
right?
Correct. So you have extension without loss. That's the actual. The board levied 16.676. We actually got 16.045, but then when the county provided its loss factor, we actually received a total of 16.527,280. And so the reason the boxes that are shaded in gray for the 2017 year for the proposed levy is basically what we're saying to the board is we should levy 4.95%. Okay? In truth in taxation law in Illinois says anything over 5% you have to hold a public hearing. We've always held a public hearing here under my tenure just to be transparent to the community and allow people to come and hear the levy and ask questions, but technically we're not required to unless it's over 5%. The reason we do the 4.95% if there's some new properties or something that we miss, it provides us that overarching to make sure we account for all dollars that we're warranted to receive. What the board really should be prepared for is you normally only get from the county is CPI, whatever CPI is for the previous year, and then that 3% loss factor. So even though the board is going to be levying a 16.8 in that first column H, we're probably going to get up closer to, we'll probably get closer to about 16.382, between 16.382 and 16.8, okay, once they add the loss factor. All right, and so what happens on the tax report, if you ever pulled this document, you'll see it'll have the board's levy amount, which will be the 16.840, then it will show you a 3% loss factor, a separate dollar amount, for a maximum allowable levy of 17.345. Really, at the end of the day, it's whatever CPI is plus a 3% loss factor. So we should get about 16.8 next year, which is roughly about $347,000 increase from this year. And I show that in the next box.
Deficit.
If we stay flat.
And that the debt, though, they do it based on actual, right?
It's based
They
on
do put the
actual.
loss factor, but they don't look at CPI. It's based on actual.
Based on
right?
actual, so they'll look
in
at
the
all
final
what your
version of
outstanding
this-
bonds are,
Yeah,
put the total on there with payment and interest on it, and
Right.
it will be what the total is.
and so when we do the final presentation, we already know what it is going to be for next year, right?
Yeah, I gotta just double check with all the refinancing on it to make
Yeah.
sure, okay, exactly how many bonds are outstanding, what is gonna be our principal and interest. I'll have a better handle on
Okay.
what the exact payment will be.
So we just wanted to prepare the boards for that. What you're seeing, what you're levying in the gray box and with the loss factor, you're most likely going to see the two columns to the left of it with the CPI, the tax cap. And so for us, that's about, like I said, a $347,000 increase in the ed fund, a total of about $412,000 in our operating funds. Anybody have any questions on that? Now, Wes, you brought up a point earlier about, hey, we still have a $360,000 deficit. I talked about this with the Finance Council a little bit, and this is something Tim and I have been going, Mr. Walsh and I have been going back and forth on a little bit, and he has a good point. The only thing the school district does on an accrual basis is its audit every year. And so this year, before this board approved basically a cash-based budget in September, we had received almost $600,000 in property tax payments that came after July 1. So our auditor accrued those. But technically, we all know that they're going to come up this year when we get to the end of the year as cash on hand. And so if you think about that, when we approved that budget in September, those payments received, since our budget's pretty much a cash-based budget, that's how the treasurer's office operates, we really almost have a $300,000 surplus instead of the $300,000
The
deficit.
600,000 should have been, it's in this,
Yeah, because we
Because we
received
get it
receipts
in
this
this
year.
fiscal
it's
year.
in this
Yeah.
fiscal year.
But he
Although
also-
the auditor kicks it back and accrues it to the previous fiscal year, when we get to the end of the budget cycle, it's going to be sitting there as cash on hand.
So what I suggested they consider, and it's going to take them looking into this, is rather than doing the budget, when you approve the final budget, based on what we just did with the levy here, because they'll know that, the budget should also include the carryover receipts that you got from last year's that came in this year already. They're pretty much done collecting the second assessment by the time we approve our final budget, but we haven't made an adjustment to that budget number for the cash we already received. But the other thing Scott's gonna have to take a look at, that happens every year. So some of the levy that we are going to expect or putting in, if we just put the levy in for the budget for that year, some of the receipts are gonna come in after the fiscal year also. And the difficult part about it is the county doesn't always collect the money at the same time. They don't send the bills out at the same time every year.
Right.
So it's a little bit of an art as opposed to a science, but I think we could be more accurate if we took a little closer look at
And
that.
where we're going back and forth on this a little bit is that this isn't the first time this happened. There's a historical trend.
Right.
So even though we're budgeting, I mean, it kind of offsets in the long haul because you're budgeting that you're going to receive 98 or 90% of those, 99% of those tax dollars. Even if you only get 94, you weren't counting on the 3 or 4% you got after.
From last time, because your budget is
So it almost brings you
94%,
close to
carrying
the,
that
it almost
forward
brings
to
you
the
close
next-
to the 98 or so that you were budgeting anyways. So I don't know if it will offset it much, but that's something we can look at and doing. But it's still going to keep us, we'll still be close. We got to keep that deficit, an eye on the deficit. Does everybody understand the levy part? So one of the things that's required by the Board of Education is in December, we'll have a hearing, even though we're not required because we're under the 5% of the truth in taxation law. We'll still have a hearing so that the community can come and listen to why the board is levying what it's levying, and if anybody has any questions, they could ask them at that time at the hearing. The board will need to approve the levy in December, and Scott needs to take it down to actually the county building and submit it so that it's in time because it has to be due before the end of December.
The third Thursday, I believe. It's
Right. Okay?
That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. So there's nothing to vote on that. We're gonna vote next meeting.